very pleased to be joined today by Herb Roitblat, who is, this is a great intro because, you know, people who know Herb know that, if I may quote or crib the line from a movie about the city of Boston, he's wicked smart. Wicked smart.
Herb, I think you have to say smart.
Smart, wicked smart. He parked his car outside the yacht. Yeah.
Hey, done in Cuba.
Herb, correct me if I'm wrong, Herb. You're currently the principal data scientist at Mimecast, but
Yes.
that does no justice to your length of service and quality of service to our industry in the field of computer sciences and all the crazy stuff that goes on with that field. I'm really happy to have somebody who's not a marketer in that field, and of course, don't tell Gail that I said that. I won't be around for that. If there's a blank on the screen in the next interview, you'll know.
We know why.
There were repercussions.
We'll make exceptions for Gail.
Yes. So, Herb, tell us how you got into this crazy business of ours and why you have spent all these years trying to explain technology to attorneys, probably 10 of whom even want to listen to you.
Right. And then you can go with and why in the world are you still staying in this?
Yeah.
The answer to that is crabs in a bucket. And if you're in Baltimore, you know.
Yep, I get it.
Put a bunch of crabs in the bucket. A crab will try to crawl out. The other crabs will grab a hold of them and pull them back in. So there's lots of times when I tried to get out of eDiscovery, but I just kept.
When I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Oh, okay.
So how I got started is by accident. I was at the University of Hawaii teaching psychology, cognitive science, stuff like that, modeling dolphin biosonar, and a guy found me, wanted help with his marketing. He thought that cognitive science had some things to say about how to make things more memorable. And he was trying to market travel services back in the old days when the way they sold wholesale travel services was they went around call centers with carousel projectors and said, "This is our hotel, please book it." And so I helped him make it more memorable. A few years later, he came back and said that he wanted to make a search engine for magazines. And he had this really complex Boolean. This is about 1997, 98 when he came back. And I said, we can do better than that with neural networks. So we did. And that became Dolphin Search. The problem was, back in those days, this is before Google, nobody knew how to pay for it.
Okay.
So we ended up wandering around trying to do knowledge management, sold exactly one system, and then ran into eDiscovery. And that's how I got into eDiscovery.
So basically, you ran into an attorney who was like, "Oh, I could use that." Was that pretty much what happened, or like?
Yeah,
how was that entry?
Well, at the time, all the eDiscovery companies were copy shops or review shops that got into technology. We were a technology company, and we could do things like read Linux files that other people couldn't in those days. And so somebody said, "Well, can you help us with this?" And then we found other people who could educate us, and that's how we got into it.
Cool. And I met you the first time I met you, Herb, that I recall, was at some sort of a conference in Seattle. And was that coincidence? Were you working with any of the early? Because a number of the early eDiscovery companies happened to be in that Seattle, Portland market, or was that just coincidence that it was a conference that you were at?
Somehow I got in contact with Sherry Estrin.
Okay.
And she organized that thing in Seattle, and that's where I met you. I remember that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
was just-
I'm almost
I was
afraid
just-
to ask for the stories from it.
No, it's like I met somebody who could who understood a better way of doing this. Because as you said, most of the early e-discovery companies, with few exceptions, were from the copy background. Not to put that down, they've been very successful, but looking for a technology solution was a horribly difficult search back in those days. And then
Dolphin search to search for it. So.
Exactly. But then, so Herb first of all understood it, but second of all could explain it, which was a remarkable confluence of skills. Yeah. So okay.
So you had no prior experience working with attorneys or anything like that. How was it switching from dolphins to sharks?
Non-intelligent mammals.
It was a challenge. Tom complimented me on my ability to explain things, but that is something I had to learn. If you work with dolphins, video companies show up. They want to make a show about it, and we had people coming in and doing stuff. They would interview me, and I would always get left on the cutting room floor because I would explain things as a scientist, but their audience was, my mother.
Right.
And so I had to learn, and frankly, it took me a good long time to learn how to explain things in a way that people could understand. I remember meetings at Dolphin Search where I was explaining things I thought in a great way, and everybody just kind of looked at me like, what is he talking about? Why would he talk about that? I don't understand. So I had to work at it, and it's not automatic and it's not easy, but one learns.
Right. It's a natural skill. It's for most people that doesn't come naturally. And let's start with any tips for people, like as people in this industry, because there are a lot of smart people in our industry, and a lot of them don't necessarily, they might understand the law really, really well. They might understand technology today really, really well. Getting those two to talk together and getting them to actually understand one another can be very difficult, and usually it's especially the technologists who have to be explaining things to the attorneys, because they're the ones who are making the final decisions and leading the way here. Any tips for people that you've learned over the years in terms of how to communicate that?
Yeah, it's empathy. Try to figure out what the other person doesn't know, and what the other person does know, build on what they do know, and move them towards what they don't know. I think too often people try to make the argument that, if they don't know it, they're stupid. But that's not the case. They're just ignorant, and ignorance is curable. As a professor, which I was in those days, my job was to stomp out ignorance and stupidity wherever I may find it. So I had the notion of explaining things, but explaining things in your psychology class is not quite the same thing as explaining things to people who before that didn't know they even had an interest in it.
Yeah. Right. And especially because most of the students in the psychology class, I assume, weren't working on something that could be, a couple $100 million at stake.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So
part of the problem too, Herb, is I'm sure you see this, is this technology, the technology that we use, whether you call it, and I don't want to get into that whole, the Tar Wars, whatever you call it. Yeah. But it's constantly evolving. Now we've got the whole new, the AI bubble, right? That's kind of grown out of the side, and but it is constantly evolving, and so I almost feel like you have a discussion with somebody, and then 12 months later they say to you, "But that's not what you told me last year." And I said, "Well, yeah, because things change, And
you're talking about public health, eDiscovery,
whatever.
You mean the world evolves? No.
Yes,
come on.
Exactly. We're not in a static environment, and that I think that's difficult for people sometimes because it's so quick. Technology is just think about where we've come from when you first started with the Dolphins to where we're at now. It is in a abstract sense, or standing back and looking at it, really a remarkable evolution, a very fast cycle of evolution that is ongoing. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, if I have anything to say about it, we're nowhere near the end of it.
What would you say is the biggest change that you've seen over the last 20 some years? I mean, what's really, the shocking, you weren't expecting that kind of change to take place?
It's hard to know what I expected in those days because I didn't know enough to really expect much of anything. But when I started, a gig was big. Now it's don't even get me out of bed for a gig.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So the exponential growth of data and therefore the need for the higher end analytics and technology and AI and all of those, machine learning coming into play as not just okay, here's a cool technology that might help, but actually it's the basis of what you can't do it without it. So
I had a call from an attorney doing a white collar criminal case the other day, and he said, criminal, I'm a criminal attorney, right? And the feds are going to give me, they just told me 7 terabytes of data. I don't even know what a terabyte is.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with it? What do I do here? So yeah, you're right. That data growth is just been extraordinary. How have people reacted, Herb? Are they better? Are they more receptive now, or are people more?
I think the fights we were fighting in early 2000s, there were things like, no, it's got to be on paper because that's the way it really is.
Bates numbers. It's got to be Bates numbers.
But if you review it electronically, you don't know that it was the way the person saw it, and so therefore we can't do it. And then we also had lawyers telling me I could go through a box of paper faster than you can display it on the screen.
Of course. I still hear that. I literally still hear that. I can. And then I'm just sort of dumbfounded. I just kind of stand there and say, I don't think I really want to talk to you.
Well,
one of the first cases we worked on, this was probably about 2001. The producing party was going to produce, I think, 13 million pages of email on paper because they knew the receiving party, like your criminal attorney, would never be able to go through it all.
Right.
And I figured out that would weigh about 65 tons.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
It's insane how much things have changed. So just going back to you were at Dolphin, and then you moved over to Orcatech or that.
Well, we left Dolphin Search, and Brian Gilbert and I started Orcatech.
Okay.
And we had to move up the food chain because people knew me as a Dolphin guy.
Right.
So and I couldn't use Dolphin anything anymore.
Right.
We switched over and moved up to something more aggressive. And we actually thought that we could be closer to the original idea that we had for Dolphin Search, be in the search and advertising business. But that's one of the cases where I kept getting calls to please help us, please, and that kind of thing. And following that, we ended up back in eDiscovery, trying to help a company improve their technology. And they ended up having, basically not having time to move forward because they're so busy just dealing with their day-to-day giant cases. They didn't have time even to talk to us about what they wanted, so that we couldn't build it for them. And we wandered around and ended up, Brian did escape from eDiscovery.
He got out of the bucket.
Ooh, we need to talk to him, find out what the secret is.
Yeah.
He ended up being the managing director for a big internet advertising organization.
Okay.
and I just kept getting pulled back in. Now at Mimecast, I don't do just eDiscovery, but I work closely with our archiving team and try to increase our use of AI and stuff like that, our use of analytics. But also I work on computer security now and detecting phishing and categorizing documents, things like that.
Cool.
So,
broadening your horizons.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. I get to do more different things.
Yeah. So, what of the things that you're doing today? What's exciting you? What's keeping you? Like you're like, wow, that's really cool, and I think that there can be a huge impact there.
In terms of impact in eDiscovery, I think it's analytics. I think that we now have the capability of doing a whole lot of stuff that helps us to understand what we have in a document collection that we just computation couldn't do before. It just wasn't practical. But now things like linguistic processing, analyzing sentences, getting the propositions out of them, getting sets of facts. Computers have increased so much in their capacity that we can do things that I felt I needed to avoid because they were too complicated.
Right, or too time consuming. Yeah. I think back to, we're 5.5, almost 6 years from the sale of Equivio to Microsoft, and if I could have had the power of the cloud and cloud computing that's now available, if I could have had it then, like the stuff that we could have done is just insane. And luckily I'm able to still work on stuff and get stuff in to big products, but still it's that shift even over the last 4 years, like 3 years. I mean, it just constantly the power is increasing. So that's really cool in terms of the analytics. But what else are you seeing? What else, like you said security, phishing, privacy, all kinds of other areas that you're able to work on. What's the big thing for you that's really getting you going?
Oh, it's still the stuff related to eDiscovery.
Still discovery.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're still the cool kids.
It's not always stuff.
I don't know about saying, Tom, you can't say we're the cool kids. Come on. Yeah, that's just like pushing way too far. So.
I'm definitely not one of the cool kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
I'm lucky if the cool kids let me eat in the same cafeteria.
Yeah, right. Table, right? Yeah. Are people listening to you more now?
That's hard to know. Some people are, but it's just. I mean, people have their agendas and they do what they do, and sometimes there's room for other thoughts than solving today's problems. So one of the things I'm working on with that is I called it FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Right.
And John Rabier asked me, you go to a judge, you say, we found 80% of the responsive documents. Why shouldn't the judge tell you to go find the other 20%? And the short answer to that is reasonableness. That 80% is reasonable, finding the rest of it is not.
And proportionality.
That's not always very satisfying.
Yeah, the cost, yeah.
Yeah, the cost. So what I thought about that for a while, and I tried a bunch of different things, and it came to me that we're not really interested in finding all the documents. We're interested in finding all the information in there, all the topics, and if we can find, if we have found all the topics, why go look more? So what are the odds of finding something we didn't already know in the documents that we haven't found?
Mm-hmm.
So I did a mathematical analysis of that, and I said, well, the probability is very low that there's going to be anything there that you're not going to find. And one of the correct criticisms was, your model is fine, but what about reality? And so I haven't done a study of a real eDiscovery case. I don't have access to those anymore. But what I did do is get a collection of microaggression statements, which I started working on because it was something that we were interested in back in May, trying to help people identify their inadvertent racism in what they're saying. So people who don't intend to be racist sometimes are, and why, and how can we help them? Well, so I got this collection of statements, some of which were identified as being microaggressions, some not. I analyzed those using a standard machine learning package to get all the topics out of the whole set that were identified as being microaggressions. So I got 100 topics out of those. Then I did machine learning on everything and found 80% of the microaggressions. Turns out that the 80% that I found covered all the topics that were available. There were no topics left to be discovered that hadn't been covered in the 80% that we found.
Yep. Yeah, and obviously there can be something that is such low prevalence that the topic isn't enough to pop up as a valid topic. But again, that's where reasonableness and proportionality come in terms of if you're gonna have a human go through all of those, what are the chances? And we know that what those chances are that they're not going to catch every single one. So
yes.
It's that same argument. I think that's awesome. That's cool.
So Herb, to that point, or kind of to that point, but
and Tom, we've got 2 minutes.
Okay,
so almost done.
Never mind then. Let me go to my last question. Well, because this would be a more lengthy discussion.
Yeah.
Last question, Tom?
I think so, because we're a little bit caught for time today. So
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Herb, we've prepared you for this. If you could spend a day with anybody in our profession, living or dead, doing anything, not necessarily talking machine learning. You could go sailing, you could go fishing, you could go swim with the dolphins in Hawaii. Who would you do that with?
That's really a hard question, because there's lots of people that I mean, one of the things I miss this year of not traveling is not seeing those people that I like to spend time with.
Yep.
But if I have to pick one right now, I'd probably pick Paul Grimm. Because he makes stuff that I find boring interesting, and he's such a thoughtful guy about these things that spending some time with him is always rewarding and always pleasant. So it would be a tough choice, but he's always worthwhile.
Little known fact about Judge Grimm that we discovered when he and his wife came to Jazz Fest, I believe it's 2 years ago now. He's a big Zydeco fan. He loves Zydeco music, yes, and just was enthralled, of course, because in New Orleans, there was an entire stage devoted to Zydeco all day long. And according to our friend Craig Ball, I understand, I hope I'm not embarrassing him, but I understand that Paul has actually gone out and bought a rub board, what people refer to as a washboard, and is learning to play Zydeco music on the rub board. Yeah. So I'm guessing though Herb probably does not want to hang out with him, listening to him learn how to play it, but maybe after he finishes learning. No, I say that only to say he's one of those people, and it's a great point. He's one of those people who's got a broad spectrum of interest.
Yeah.
Therefore, spending time with him is always interesting.
Yep.
It's always interesting. There's always something interesting going on.
Yeah.
Not the first time, but one of the first times I saw him, I was at a little conference in Washington, and he gave up to review case law. I don't like listening to case law reviews. Boring. But his was fascinating. And that has always stuck in my head that day. How he could make something that I would ordinarily find boring into something interesting.
He at a conference a number of years ago, he displayed for the first time that I saw it his great sense of humor, which he has. He's a very funny guy. when he chooses to be. And he was on a panel, and he was asked, it was after the rather contentious rules committee meeting at Duke, what they called the Duke conference, to talk about it. There were reports of lots of argumentation going on there. Somebody asked him that. He said, is it true that there were arguments about the new rules coming out at the Duke meeting? He goes, no. He said it was great. It was a fun time. Everybody got together. We got along famously, and it was just like Woodstock. Well, without the music or the food or the sex, it was nothing like Woodstock at all. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, we have to wrap it up, huh, Rocky?
I think we unfortunately do. Although I might say that we might need to book her for a round 2.
I think you're right. I think we need a postscript on this. We've touched on a couple of things that we need to go into some more. So
I'm happy to talk.
Yeah. Great. Herb, thanks so much for joining us. Rocky, thanks for your time as always, and we'll see all you folks again sometime soon in the eDiscovery channel.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.